Yeah, real challenge for us heading on the road to one of the toughest places to play, not only in the conference but in the country, headed to Wichita State, coming off of their win in conference play the other night. And they got Ronnie DeGray back as well, who adds to their team. But just a very talented team that poses a lot of challenges for us in the paint, being on the road, the way they defend and the way they take care of the basketball.
Kind of seeing, the volatility of the conference, watching that Memphis Temple game last night. I mean, is that, do you think it's emblematic of the games that you've been seeing, just up and down?
Yeah, sure. I think it's conference play all around. I think you have a lot of teams, and I think the team that we're about to play is exactly in the same scenario. They're so much better than their conference record indicates. Wichita State had a great non-conference and missed a couple wins to start conference play. Like I said, just got their first win. But you look at Memphis. I mean, Memphis had 2 wins, their last 2 wins prior, North Texas and us, 4-point wins, both at home at Memphis. And then they go on the road last night to Temple. Temple beats them. Temple is doing great. Temple now is 3-1 in the conference. Our sole win is versus Temple here at home. We've been in single possessions games for the majority of conference play outside of the other night in terms of the final score versus North Texas, and even with that, having a lead at halftime. So I do think, and you look across the country, even some of the Power 4 conferences and non-Power 4s, I think it's still early, and I think there's still teams that have a chance to be better than their record indicates at this time.
Coach, when you do look at conference play, you're coming off 2 close losses to some of the better teams in the American. After a little time to digest that, is there anything specific that you really want to correct that's kind of keeping you up?
Yeah, I think you look at across the spectrum. We definitely had a tough schedule to start, but I don't think it gets any easier. I just think if you looked at it in a nutshell and you looked at the teams we played, home and away, you looked at in terms of us having very quick prep times and 3 straight games, teams having bye weeks. I think there was just something that happened with the schedule that made it challenging, but that's part of it. 3 games in 6 days is part of being in the conference. In terms of specific things, I thought we had been rebounding the ball very well through the first portion of the conference. We had out-rebounded our opponent every single game. The 2 things that had really hurt us in games out South Florida and at Memphis was turnovers. Then the other night, we take care of the basketball, but we don't control the defensive glass the way we had been. It was the first game in 3 that we did not meet our defensive rebounding goals, and we have internal goals that we have. And North Texas beat us to some offensive rebounds in the second half that led to 2 huge 3-pointers, especially one off a free throw that Aiton Wright ended up hitting. It was a huge play, huge momentum play. So when I look at it, the biggest thing has been turnovers in a couple games. It has been defensive rebounding last game, and free throw shooting has hurt us in 2 games, Florida Atlantic and last game. We only got to the free throw line 10 times versus North Texas, and unfortunately we only made 4 of those, which is unlike us in terms of volume and getting to the free throw line, but it did hurt us to only go 4 for 10 that game.
When you look at Wichita State, I mean, you kind of mentioned it off the top, but when you dive into the matchup, what are the biggest things they do well?
Man, they're paint presence. This is one of the very top teams in the country, scoring the ball in the paint, efficiency in the paint. We know with Quincy Ballard in there, but it's more than just Ballard. Ballard does what he does, but Washington, their guards, Bell and Hill, again, they got DeGray back now. DeGray starts to stretch the floor for them, can really shoot the basketball, and they take care of the basketball really well. And that's obviously, in our opinion, a telltale sign of a team. They take care of the basketball well, and they defensive rebound very well. So those are real challenges, especially going on the road into a hostile environment.
You've got 2 road games coming up and a little bit of a tough travel schedule. You mentioned it's already been kind of a tough schedule to start conference play. What's been the message to your players as far as just attacking that on the road?
Yeah, great question. Resiliency. It's just got to be about resiliency. I don't think it's any tougher than any other team has. You can look at it, and after the fact, you can look at standings and say, you played some of the teams that were in the top half at this point. But as we talked about at the beginning of this, I think that's going to change over time. Wichita State can very easily, and in my opinion, will be towards the top of this league. So it changes. So from a standpoint of the way the schedule looks, road games, quick turnarounds, it's just about resiliency. And we're facing it at the highest level because we got to be resilient with the fact that we haven't won some games and that we're in a little bit of a stretch where we've lost some games. And you have to be resilient to continue to compete and turn this thing around. And our group is. Our group is competitive. They're resilient. They practice like that. We'll have another good practice right now, and we'll keep our head on that mission.
How have the players addressed some of those losses and going through a tough stretch of your schedule so far?
Pissed off. frustrated, but also able to look in the mirror, and us as a team look in the mirror and say, here's where we have to be better. Maybe it's rebounding. Maybe it's taking care of the basketball. It's a play here. It's a play there. I mean, the other night, I think I looked at it after. I think, North Texas led for 17-something minutes. We led for 17-something minutes, and it was tied for the rest. I mean, that was an even ball game. It's such a fine line. We don't have a great margin for error. I mean, that is something that we know as a team, as a coaching staff. So those finite plays, those runs, we have been hurt with a few runs throughout conference play. There's maybe a run in the first half, a run in the second half, and we got to do what we can to minimize those runs so that teams don't make it a 2, 3, 4 possession game, because we're just not built for that right now.
We talked about resilience. RJ's the guy we've been asking what's wrong. Now it's what's right. I mean, what do you feel like he's kind of done these last few games?
Well, I said this when he made the transition to coming off the bench. Again, not for anything negative, just to be able to take the game in for a few minutes and be able to see, maybe take the pressure off a little bit, to feel like had to get off to a great start, or thinking about one thing over the other, as opposed to just play a complete game. Do what R.J. Felton does. And what R.J. Felton has always done is be a dynamic rebounder. I mean, that is a great thing. There are more dynamic scorers and dynamic playmakers than there are dynamic rebounders. And to be a 6'4" guard that can impact the game as if he's a 6'8", 6'9" forward, he came off the bench and he had 33 rebounds in 3 games. Those plays are what make R.J. Felton special. He can do all the other stuff, but when he locked in on doing that, it impacted our team. They were all one-possession games. We won one of those games. But his rebounding, you asked for someone specific, I think that's what flipped it and got him back going to being himself.
Thanks, Cody.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Cody.